In Venezuela, the United Socialist Party of the country won 20 governorships and the mayor's office of the Libertador municipality of the capital district after Sunday's elections. In Brazil, military police in Rio de Janeiro perpetrated a new massacre during an operation. Leaders of China and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations agreed to strengthen cooperation to help the region recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Hello from the headquarters of teleSUR in Havana. I am Diego Martin. This is teleSUR from the south. Let's begin with the news. The president of the Venezuelan National Electoral Council, Pedro Calzadilla, presented Monday the second official bulletin on the regional and municipal elections held on November 21st. In a statement to the press, the chief director of the entity specified that with the assessment of the 90.2% of the tallies, there was a registered turnout of 42.26% of citizens eligible to vote. In addition, he detailed that out of the 23 governorships in dispute, 21 positions have been awarded so far as follows: 18 for the Great Patriotic Pole, Gran Polo Patriótico Alliance, led by the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, 2 for the Mesa de la Unidad Democrática, and 1 for another party. The Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro expressed his congratulations on the victory of the Socialist Party of Venezuela in the regional and municipal elections.
Head of the National Electoral Council. Now we see the results, product of an effort from the 24 federal entities of the country and the Patriotic Pole, the Revolutionary Force. We have won 21, including the capital of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Out of 24, 21. Good triumph, good victory, good harvest. This is a product of work, product of a persevering work, of taking the truth, righteousness to all the communities.
The Vice President of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello, stated the turnout at the November 21st regional and local elections gave a great lesson to those who anticipated instability and violent events during the day.
First of all, I want to express our joy of what happened today, nationwide, that, well, those who expected a disaster to happen in Venezuela were disappointed because they received a great lesson.
In the meantime, the Venezuelan Minister of the Interior, Justice and Peace, Remigio Ceballos, pointed out that all institutions work together to guarantee all Venezuelans could exercise their right to vote.
We send our congratulations to everyone, the armed forces, public security agencies, the public prosecutor's office, and all the judicial institutions, and we will continue. We remain on high alert, working to ensure a successful conclusion and supporting the Strategic Operational Command in all the requirements that may arise.
The Secretary General of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America People's Trade Treaty, Sasha Llorenti, presented to the country. The International Observer highlighted the broad turnout in the electoral process of November 21st.
We are here as international observers under the invitation of the National Electoral Council, and throughout the day we have visited many voting centers, and we've seen not only a wide turnout but also a civic spirit, typical of the democratic consciousness of the Venezuelan people who are celebrating their 29th election in the last 2 decades. This, of course, also calls our attention because it not only demonstrates that the Venezuelan electoral system is one of the most reliable and secure, but it also becomes an example for the world.
Now, in the course of this, also on the regional and local elections in Venezuela, some international observers offered their first impressions within the framework of the electoral process. Ricardo Patiño, observer from Ecuador, congratulated Venezuelans and its institutions for the broad participation in the democratic process.
In all cases, there have been at least 3 electoral witnesses from 3 different political parties, And that speaks highly not only of the broad turnout, but also of the transparency of the process. I want to congratulate Venezuela, and I want to congratulate its people. I want to congratulate its institutions for achieving this important level of participation and this strengthening of democracy.
As part of the teams of international observers present at Venezuela's regional and local elections, a member of the network of intellectuals, artists, and social movements in defense of humanity, Héctor Díaz Polanco, praised on the transparency and organization of the process.
With all this, we can reassure that the Venezuelan electoral system is reliable, and it guarantees that each voter decision will be counted. We also highlight this, the Venezuelan electoral system guarantees the basic principles of the people's right to vote, and the secrecy of the vote, the integrity of the vote, and the counting of the votes.
And now Vladimir Martinez, a representative of the National Lawyers Guild of the United States, acting as observer of the electoral process in Venezuela, comments on the legislative elections held on November 21st and the results in this interview.
Well, first of all, after your presentation, what are the conclusions you've arrived to in this electoral process?
We are going to have a larger report that we're going to put out and share with the folks at the CNE and with the press generally. But our conclusions are very simple. We think that this is an election that, according to our findings, is a legitimate and legal election. It appears that the systems, the technical systems that were used are consistent with what we've seen in other countries. And really we found that there is great voter confidence in the elections, which to us points to an election that should be legitimized and should be respected by colleagues in the country and in the international community.
In these elections, there were also opposition sectors, for example, who abandoned the democratic dispute. What do you reckon from this plurality? Over 80 parties in the fight. How is that? You coming and all from the United States, a country that has Venezuela under sanctions, do you think that this can change in any way the geopolitical landscape in Venezuela?
We think it's an incredibly important part of the process that opposition parties participated. In fact, we found that many opposition parties were present at election sites throughout the country that we visited, and we think that that's important. We think that it's important for there to be a large variety of political positions that participate in the election. We have some recommendations for the CNE about how to improve the participation of opposition parties, and we hope that they will take us up on those recommendations. But we think it's an important part of the process, and we think that, you know, given the incredible political pressure placed on Venezuela, it represents a democracy that continues to be vibrant.
Several leaders in the region, such as Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel and Bolivian head of state Luis Arce, congratulated the Venezuelan people and their institutions that once again bet on overcoming their political differences through democratic means at the polls, banishing all kinds of foreign interference. The Bolivian president also acknowledged the work of the observers who accompanied this process. We'll now take a short break. Join us again after this. Hi, welcome back to From the South. In Brazil, military police in Rio de Janeiro perpetrated a new massacre during an operation. The events unfolded over the weekend. Victims, relatives, and neighbors of the favela carried at least 10 bodies and denounced that the bodies showed signs of torture. On the other hand, witnesses assured that the massacre took place in the morning hours of Sunday after an intense confrontation between drug traffickers who dominate the favelas and the military agents of Rio de Janeiro. While the authorities of the military police confirmed that during the weekend several confrontations took place where military equipment was seized, they also recognized that the confrontations left numerous injured between policemen and traffickers. These violent events are frequent in Brazil as the police kills favela residents and poor civilians in retaliation against the drug lords in the neighborhoods. On Sunday, the main candidates for the presidency of Honduras held their final rallies in Tegucigalpa. The campaigning silence will officially come into force from Tuesday, November 23rd. 14 candidates are taking part in the presidential race. However, according to the polls, the candidate of the opposition leftist Liberty and Refoundation Party, Xiomara Castro de Zelaya, and the candidate of the Conservative National Party, Nasri Asfura, are the ones who emerge as the favorites to win on Sunday, November 28th. 5 million Hondurans are called to vote in these polls to elect a new president, 128 deputies to the National Congress, 298 mayors, and 20 deputies to the Central American Parliament.
A woman is needed to assume the presidency of the Republic and to manage funds with transparency. And that, we will say, out with corruption in Honduras.
I'm different because of my work, my effort, my way of doing things, of doing politics.
Now, in Colombia, academics, politicians, diplomats, representatives of the justice system, and government officials commemorated the 5th anniversary of the peace agreement between the Colombian government and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, the People's Army. In a press release, 30 organizations called to the European Union and the international community to continue insisting on the implementation of all aspects of the peace agreement and to keep supporting the negotiated solution of the conflict. Since the signing of the peace agreement, more than 200 former combatants and more than 500 human rights defenders have been killed, in many cases while working to build peace and implement the agreement in different regions of the country. The organizations agreed that the violent repression of the protests in 2020 and 2021 was a sign that the response of both the government and the state security forces to social demonstration is through military confrontation, due to the lack of structural reforms that would enable Colombia to have a security force fit for peace and guaranteeing democratic participation. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Lebanese counterpart Abdallah Abu Habib held bilateral talks in Moscow on Monday. The ministers discussed top regional and global issues, including the country's ongoing economic and social crisis, ways to strengthen trade and economic partnership, as well as developing humanitarian relations and bilateral cooperation in trade, economy, culture, and education. Both countries have increased ties over the past few years as Russia developed a growing geopolitical interest in the region and develops gas pipelines in the eastern Mediterranean. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Monday that Moscow sent the Lebanese government satellite images from the day of last year's deadly Beirut port blast in an effort to help with the investigation. In a meeting with his Lebanese counterpart Abdallah Abu Habib, Lavrov said his government had transferred pictures prepared by the country's space agency Roscosmos. The head of the Russian diplomacy stated these images, which captured the port before and after the explosion, should help determine the cause of the blast. During their meeting, both executives discussed the possible participation of Russian companies in the reconstruction of Beirut infrastructure that was damaged in the blast. In August 2020, hundreds of tons of ammonium nitrate stored in the port of Beirut detonated, sending powerful explosion across the Lebanese capital that killed more than 200 people.
At the request of the Lebanese government, we today handed over materials prepared by Roscosmos, space images, satellite images, and we hope they will help in investigating the causes of this incident.
Well, the Russian President Alexander Lukashenko said the European Union is refusing to discuss the fate of 2,000 asylum seekers wishing to go to Europe and stranded in Belarus.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel promised me that they would consider this problem at the level of the European Union. They are not even considering it. And even the contact person that she promised me, they are not even making contact. We will cope with this ourselves if Germany does not take them in. What else can we do? We have nowhere to go. We should demand that the Germans take them in.
We have more news coming up after a final short break. Stay with us. Hi, welcome back. The leaders of China and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations agreed to strengthen cooperation to help the region recover from the COVID-19 pandemic at a virtual summit held on Monday. During the online meeting, Chinese President Xi Jinping told Asian leaders that Beijing would not bully its smaller regional neighbors amid rising tension over the South China Sea. On the other hand, Asean lauded China for its active cooperation in implementing key priorities identified in the Comprehensive Recovery Framework and its implementation plan, such as training health executives and professionals in health emergency response, supporting the COVID-19 Asian Response Fund, and expanding cooperation on COVID-19 vaccines. Both sides stress the importance of economic integration to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and speed up the region's economic recovery.
Let us keep in mind the people's aspiration for a better life and put on our shoulders the mission of our times to safeguard peace and promote development. Let us work hand in hand to build on what has been achieved and work toward a closer China Asean community with a shared future and make our region and the world even more prosperous and beautiful.
On the matter of COVID, the Mexican government warned about indicators that point to a possible fourth wave of COVID-19 infections. Health authorities reported an increase in the number of contagions after recording at least 306 new cases and close to 227 deaths in the last 24 hours. They also highlighted that in the last 14 days, the number of active cases were below 19,000. Data from the World Health Organization showed that Mexico has recorded more than 3 million cases and nearly 300,000 deaths from COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic. In the Netherlands, at least 30 people were arrested on the third night of protests against health restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Acts of violence occurred on Sunday night and took place in several Dutch towns such as Enschede and Groningen, leading to about 30 arrests. According to police forces in Roosendaal, in the south of the European nation, demonstrators set fire to an elementary school, burned a car, and detonated pyrotechnics, leading to 15 arrests. In Groningen, the northern Netherlands, the demonstration was peaceful, but at the end some groups of people set off fireworks, smashed shop windows, gathered bicycles to set them on fire, and destroyed a bus. Austria returned to a partial lockdown in the most dramatic COVID-19 restrictions seen in Western Europe for months after a weekend of violence against virus measures that rocked several cities on the continent. The Alpine nation is also imposing a sweeping vaccine mandate from February 1st, one of few places in the world to announce such a step so far. Shops, restaurants, and festive markets were shuttered on Monday, while its 8.9 million people are not allowed to leave home, with few exceptions such as going to work, shopping for essentials, and exercising, as virus cases are surging. Schools and kindergartens remain open, though parents have been asked to keep children at home when possible, despite there being no distance learning offered during the 3-week lockdown. The government implemented new pandemic restrictions that specifically affect unvaccinated people amid a record surge of infections. Health Minister Adam Wojciech said that most unvaccinated people will no longer be allowed to attend public events, go to bars and restaurants, visit hairdressers, museums, and others, or use hotels based on coronavirus test results. Only people who are vaccinated and those who have recovered from COVID-19 will remain eligible. Authorities said the goal of the measure is to motivate people to get vaccinated. Exceptions include teenagers aged 12 to 18, people whose medical condition doesn't allow vaccination, and people who have received at least one shot of a coronavirus vaccine. The announcement came last week after the exact daily tally soared to more than 22,000 new cases last Tuesday.
Some restrictions have to be done, but I'm not sure whether it is good to divide people between vaccinated and unvaccinated, and this is something which will divide our society and split the society into two parts, and I'm not sure about this is good.
We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories at our website, teleSUR English. Remember, and join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I am Diego Martin. Thanks for watching.